The church bells tolled like a death knell, each chime slicing through the humid Georgia air. Inside the small, whitewashed chapel in Savannah, a coffin sat open, surrounded by lilies and mourners dressed in black. But Elias Carter, the man they were burying, was very much alive, and he was about to crash his own funeral. Elias stood outside, hidden in the shadow of an ancient oak, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. At 28, he was lean and wiry, with dark curls that fell into his hazel eyes and a scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall. He clutched a manila envelope, its contents heavy with the truth his family had buried 6 years ago. They'd declared him dead, legally, emotionally, spiritually, because he dared to love a man. Now he was back to prove them wrong, to reclaim his name, his life, and the love he'd fought so hard to keep. 6 years earlier, Elias had been a bright-eyed college student in Atlanta, studying journalism and dreaming of a career exposing truths. His conservative family, led by his father, Pastor Jeremiah Carter, had other plans. When Elias came out at 22, his father's face turned to stone. "You're no son of mine," Jeremiah had said, his voice cold as a winter grave. The family didn't just disown him, they erased him. They filed a legal declaration of death, claiming Elias had vanished after a tragic accident. No body, no proof, just a lie to save face in their tight-knit community. Elias had fled to San Francisco, broken but determined to rebuild. There, in a city that pulsed with freedom, he met Theo Grant. Theo, 32, was a photographer with a quiet intensity. His blonde hair always a little messy, his blue eyes sharp with empathy. Their first meeting was at a dive bar in the Mission District, where Theo's camera caught Elias laughing over a spilled beer. "You've got a story in that smile," Theo had said, and Elias felt seen for the first time in years. Their love grew fast, fierce, and unshakable. Theo taught Elias to trust again, to believe in a future where he wasn't defined by his family's rejection. They built a life together, late-night talks on their apartment's fire escape, weekend trips to Big Sur, stolen kisses under the Golden Gate Bridge. But the past wasn't done with Elias. A letter arrived 3 months ago, addressed to the estate of Elias Carter. His family was holding a memorial service, claiming closure for a son they'd already mourned. The lie stung worse than the disowning. Elias wasn't dead, but they wanted the world to believe he was. "I'm going back," Elias told Theo one night, his voice trembling with resolve. They were curled up on their couch, a jazz record spinning softly. Theo's hand tightened around his. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his eyes steady. "I'm with you." And so, they'd planned it. A return to Savannah, not for revenge, but for truth. Elias would walk into that church, face his family, and show them he was alive. Heart beating, love burning, soul unbroken. Now, standing outside the chapel, Elias felt Theo's hand brush his. "You ready?" Theo whispered. Elias nodded, though his stomach churned. The envelope in his hand held documents: birth certificate, driver's license, even a notarized affidavit from a lawyer friend in San Francisco. Proof he was alive. Proof he was enough. The chapel doors creaked open, and the organ music faltered as Elias stepped inside. Heads turned. Gasps rippled through the pews. His mother, Ruth, dropped her hymn book, her face pale as if she'd seen a ghost. His sister, Hannah, 25, froze, her brown eyes wide with shock. And there, at the pulpit, was Jeremiah, his father, his face a mask of righteous fury. "Who dares interrupt this sacred service?" Jeremiah's voice boomed. Elias stepped forward, his boots echoing on the hardwood floor. "Your son," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Elias Carter. Not dead. Very much alive." The room erupted in whispers. Jeremiah's jaw tightened, but Elias didn't flinch. He held up the envelope. "You buried me to save your reputation. But I'm here, and I'm not hiding anymore." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. "I was cast out for loving who I love. But love isn't a sin. It's the only thing that's kept me alive." Theo stood beside him, a quiet pillar of strength. Elias's mother sobbed softly, torn between shame and relief. Hannah took a hesitant step forward, her face a mix of guilt and longing. The congregation was a sea of conflicted faces, some horrified, some curious, a few tearful with understanding. Jeremiah descended from the pulpit, his eyes blazing. "You're no son of mine," he repeated, the words a knife. Elias met his gaze. "I don't need to be. I've built a life without your approval. I came to show you I'm not the one who's dead. You are, for turning your back on your own blood." The words hung heavy in the air. Elias felt Theo's hand squeeze his, grounding him. This wasn't the end, but the beginning of a reckoning. He'd walked into his own funeral, not to mourn, but to fight for the life he'd earned. The silence in the chapel was suffocating, broken only by the soft creak of pews as people shifted uncomfortably. Elias stood tall, the envelope still raised like a shield, his heart racing but his resolve unbreakable. Theo's presence beside him was a lifeline, his steady gaze a reminder that Elias wasn't alone in this storm. Jeremiah's face twisted with rage, but there was something else. Fear, perhaps, or the flicker of shame. "This is blasphemy," he spat, his voice trembling. "You dare defile this house of God with your lies?" The accusation stung, but Elias had expected it. His father had always wielded religion like a weapon, and now it was aimed at him again. "They're not lies," Elias said, his voice clear. He opened the envelope, pulling out the documents. "My birth certificate, my ID, legal proof I'm alive. You told the world I was dead because you couldn't face who I am." He handed the papers to Hannah, who stood closest, her hands shaking as she took them. Her eyes scanned the pages, and a tear slipped down her cheek. "Elias," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ruth, his mother, stepped forward, her face a mask of anguish. We thought you were gone," she said, her voice barely audible. "You left, and we didn't know where you went." Elias's chest tightened. Her words were a half-truth, a fragile excuse. They'd known he was alive when they filed the declaration. They'd just chosen to bury him in their minds. "You didn't look for me," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't want to find me. You wanted me gone." The words cut through the room, and Ruth flinched as if struck. The congregation murmured, some nodding in sympathy, others glaring with judgment. Elias didn't care. He wasn't here for their approval, only their acknowledgement. Theo stepped closer, his shoulder brushing Elias's. "He's not alone anymore," Theo said, his voice calm but firm, directed at Jeremiah. "Elias has a life, a home, people who love him for who he is. You don't get to erase that." His words were a quiet challenge, and Elias felt a surge of gratitude. Theo wasn't just his partner, he was his anchor. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed at Theo. "And who are you to speak in my church?" he demanded. Theo didn't flinch. "I'm the man who loves your son," he said simply. The words landed like a thunderclap, and the room fell silent again. Elias's heart swelled. Theo had never shied away from their truth, and now he was proclaiming it in the lion's den. Hannah clutched the documents, her gaze flickering between Elias and their father. "Dad, is this true?" she asked, her voice small but insistent. Did you declare him dead?" Jeremiah's silence was answer enough. The congregation's whispers grew louder, a mix of shock and disapproval. A woman in the back, Mrs. Thompson, who'd known Elias since he was a boy, stood up. "Jeremiah, how could you do this to your own child?" she asked, her voice trembling with indignation. The question broke the dam. Other voices joined in, some defending Jeremiah's authority, others questioning his morality. Elias felt the weight of their scrutiny, but he also saw cracks in the facade his father had built. These people, his community, weren't as united in their judgment as Jeremiah had hoped. "I didn't come to destroy you," Elias said, addressing his father directly. "I came to show you I'm alive. I'm happy. I'm loved. And I won't let you pretend otherwise." He turned to the congregation, his voice steady. "I know some of you think I'm a sinner. That's your right. But I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to live my truth." Ruth reached out, her hand trembling, but stopped short of touching him. "Elias, I didn't know how to reach you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was afraid." Elias wanted to believe her, wanted to bridge the chasm between them, but the years of silence stood like a wall. "You could have tried," he said softly. "You all could have." Theo's hand found his again, a silent promise. Elias looked at him, and for a moment, the chaos of the chapel faded. Theo's eyes were steady, full of love and strength, and Elias knew that whatever happened next, they'd face it together. Jeremiah raised his hand, silencing the room. "This service is over," he said, his voice cold. "Leave, Elias. You've done enough damage." But Elias didn't move. "I'm not leaving until you acknowledge me," he said. "Not as your son, but as a person. Alive. Real." The standoff stretched on, the air thick with tension. Hannah stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Elias," she said. "I didn't know, I didn't understand. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start." Elias nodded, his throat tight. Maybe there was hope for her, for them, but it would take time. As the congregation began to disperse, some casting sympathetic glances, others avoiding his gaze, Elias felt a strange peace. He'd faced his past, his family, his pain. He hadn't won them over, but he'd reclaimed his place in the world. With Theo by his side, he turned to leave the chapel, the weight of the envelope lighter now. The fight wasn't over, but he was no longer invisible. The savannah air felt heavier as Elias and Theo stepped out of the chapel, the weight of the confrontation clinging to them like damp heat. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cobblestone street, and Elias's chest ached with a mix of relief and unresolved pain. He'd faced his family, but the wounds they'd inflicted were still raw, bleeding beneath the surface. Theo squeezed his hand, his voice soft. "You were incredible in there," he said. Elias managed a small smile, but his mind was racing. "I don't know if I changed anything," he admitted. "They might never see me as anything but a mistake." Theo stopped walking, turning to face him. "You're not a mistake, Elias. You're the bravest person I know." The words were a balm, soothing the sting of his father's rejection. They checked into a small inn on the outskirts of town, a quaint place with creaky floors and mismatched furniture. The room smelled of lavender and old wood, and Elias sank onto the bed, exhausted. Theo sat beside him, pulling out his camera. "Want to see something?" he asked, scrolling through photos on the screen. They were shots from their life in San Francisco. Elias laughing at a street fair, the two of them hiking in Marin, their hands intertwined at a foggy beach. "This is who you are," Theo said. "Not what they tried to make you." Elias's eyes stung, but he nodded. Theo's love was a constant, a lighthouse in the storm of his past. "I want to try with Hannah," Elias said after a moment. She seemed different, like she might listen. Theo nodded. "Then we'll find her. But tonight you rest. You've carried enough for one day." The next morning, Elias called Hannah. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, a neutral space away from their father's shadow. The shop was bustling, filled with the clink of mugs and the hum of conversation. Hannah arrived, her brown hair pulled back, her eyes wary but softer than they'd been in the chapel. She was 25 now, no longer the teenager who'd idolized their father. "I didn't know what they did," she said, clutching her coffee. "Dad told me you were gone, that you chose to disappear. I believed him." Elias's heart twisted. "I didn't choose to leave, Hannah. I was pushed out." He told her everything. The night their father threw him out, the years of scraping by in San Francisco, the pain of learning he'd been declared dead. Hannah listened, tears welling in her eyes. "I should have questioned him," she said. "I was scared too, of what he'd say, what he'd do." Theo, sitting quietly beside Elias, spoke up. "It's not too late to know him now," he said. "He's your brother, and he's here." Hannah looked at Theo, then at Elias, her expression torn. "I want to try," she said finally. "But Dad, he won't change. He's already telling people you're delusional, that the documents are fake." The words hit Elias like a punch, but he wasn't surprised. Jeremiah's pride was a fortress, unyielding and cold. "I don't need him to change," Elias said. "I just need to live my truth. And I want you in my life, Hannah, if you're willing." She nodded, her voice barely audible. "I am." It was a fragile promise, but it was enough for now. They spent the rest of the morning talking, tentative at first, then warmer, reminiscing about childhood memories. Racing bikes through the neighborhood, sneaking cookies from the jar. For the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of family. Not the one he'd lost, but one he might rebuild. Back at the inn, Elias and Theo planned their next move. The town was buzzing with gossip about the funeral, and Elias knew his father wouldn't let the challenge go unanswered. Sure enough, a local newspaper ran a story the next day, quoting Jeremiah. "My son is lost to us, led astray by sin. We mourn the boy he was." The words were a calculated blow, framing Elias as the prodigal son who'd fallen too far to be saved. Theo slammed the paper down. "He's trying to control the narrative," he said, his voice tight with anger. Elias nodded, his jaw set. "Then we tell our own story." They contacted a journalist friend in San Francisco, Maya, who worked for an independent outlet. Maya flew to Savannah, eager to cover Elias's story, a tale of resilience, love, and a family's betrayal. She interviewed Elias and Theo, her questions sharp but kind, drawing out the raw emotion of their journey. As they spoke, Elias felt the weight of his story shift. It wasn't just about his pain. It was about survival, about the power of love to heal what hate had broken. Maya's article would be published online, and Elias hoped it would reach others who'd been cast out, showing them they weren't alone. But he also knew the backlash would come. His father's congregation was loyal, and Savannah was a small town. The fight for his truth was far from over. That night, as they lay in bed, Theo traced circles on Elias's back. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we face it together." Elias turned to him, their faces close in the dark. "I don't know how I got so lucky," he whispered. Theo smiled, his eyes soft. "We're not lucky. We're stubborn. And we love each other too much to let go." They kissed, slow and sure, and for a moment, the world outside their room didn't exist. Maya's article went live 2 days later, and Savannah erupted. The headline, "Declared dead for being gay," one man's fight to reclaim his life, spread like wildfire across social media. Elias and Theo watched the comments pour in from their room, a mix of support and vitriol. Strangers called Elias a hero. Others echoed his father's rhetoric, branding him a sinner. But the support outweighed the hate and messages from other queer people. Those who'd been disowned, erased, or silenced flooded Elias's inbox. "Your story saved me," one wrote. "I thought I was alone." Hannah texted Elias, her words cautious but warm. "I read the article. I'm proud of you." She invited them to her apartment, a small place near the riverfront, away from their parents' influence. When they arrived, Hannah greeted them with a nervous smile, her living room cluttered with books and art supplies. "I've been thinking," she said, pouring tea. "I want to help you. Dad's wrong, and I'm done staying quiet." Elias felt a flicker of hope, but he was wary. "What about Mom?" he asked. Hannah's face fell. "She's torn. She loves you, but she's scared of Dad. Always has been." Elias nodded, the old ache returning. Ruth's silence hurt almost as much as Jeremiah's rejection. Still, Hannah's willingness to stand with him was a step toward healing. The town wasn't as forgiving. Jeremiah rallied his congregation, preaching about false prophets and deceptions of the flesh. Some locals shunned Elias and Theo, refusing service at a diner, whispering as they passed. But others reached out. Mrs. Thompson, the woman from the funeral, brought them homemade peach cobbler, her eyes misty. "I lost my nephew to hate," she said. "I won't let it happen again." Her kindness reminded Elias that not everyone in Savannah was lost to his father's dogma. Theo, ever the optimist, suggested they host a small gathering at a local park, a chance to connect with supporters and share their story in person. Elias was hesitant. Savannah wasn't San Francisco, but Theo's enthusiasm was infectious. They posted about it online, and Maya helped spread the word. To Elias's surprise, dozens showed up. Young queer kids, allies, even a few church members who'd quietly questioned Jeremiah's actions. They shared stories, laughed, cried, and for a few hours Elias felt like he belonged in the town that had once rejected him. But the peace was short-lived. That night, someone threw a brick through the inn's window, a note tied to it, "Leave or pay." Theo's face darkened as he read it, but Elias felt a strange calm. "They're scared," he said. "They know they're losing control." Still, they reported it to the police, who took a statement but offered little reassurance. Savannah was divided, and Elias was at the center of the storm. Hannah came to the inn the next day, furious about the brick. "This is Dad's doing," she said, her voice shaking. "Not directly, but his words, they're poison." She revealed she'd been digging into the legal declaration of Elias's death. With help from a friend studying law, she'd found inconsistencies, missing signatures, questionable dates. "You could fight this," she said. "Take it to court. Prove they lied." Elias hesitated. A lawsuit would be messy, public, painful, but it could clear his name, expose his father's actions, and maybe even force accountability. Theo supported him, his voice steady. "Whatever you choose, I'm here." But you deserve to be recognized, Elias. Legally, fully you. Elias nodded, his mind racing. A legal battle would be a war, but he was tired of running. They met with Hannah's friend, a sharp young lawyer named Priya, who reviewed the documents. "This is sloppy," she said, her dark eyes scanning the pages. "They didn't expect you to come back. We can challenge the declaration, maybe even sue for defamation." The idea of confronting his father in court was daunting, but Elias felt a fire kindling inside him. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every kid who'd been told their love was wrong. That evening, Elias and Theo walked along the Savannah River, the water reflecting the city's lights. "I never thought I'd be here," Elias said, his voice soft. "Fighting for my name, my place." Theo wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. "You're not just fighting for you," he said. "You're showing the world what it means to stand up." They kissed under the stars, the river's gentle flow a reminder that life moved forward, even through pain. As they returned to the inn, Elias's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow. Alone. We need to talk." "Mom!" His heart skipped. Ruth wanted to see him, but the word alone set off alarms. Theo frowned, protective. "You don't have to go," he said, but Elias shook his head. "I need to know what she wants." The past wasn't done with him yet, and neither was his family. Elias met Ruth at a quiet park bench overlooking Forsyth Park, the Spanish moss swaying in the breeze. She looked older, her auburn hair streaked with gray, her eyes heavy with guilt. Theo had insisted on waiting nearby, out of sight but close enough to step in if needed. Elias's stomach churned as he sat beside her, the silence between them thick with years of unspoken pain. "I didn't know how to stop him," Ruth said finally, her voice trembling. "Your father, he was so sure he was right. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could keep the family together." Elias's chest tightened. "You let him erase me," he said, not accusing, just stating the truth. Ruth's tears fell freely now. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself." She reached into her purse, pulling out a small photo album. Inside were pictures of Elias as a child, grinning at a county fair, blowing out birthday candles, hugging Hannah by a Christmas tree. "I kept these," Ruth said. "I never stopped loving you." Elias's throat closed, the photos a painful reminder of a life he'd lost. "Why now?" he asked. Ruth looked away, her hands twisting. "Because you came back. You're stronger than I ever was." Their conversation was raw, halting, but it cracked open a door. Ruth didn't ask for forgiveness. She knew she hadn't earned it, but she promised to support Elias's legal fight. "I'll testify," she said. "I'll tell the truth about what your father did." It was a small victory, but it gave Elias hope. Maybe not all was lost with his mother. The lawsuit moved forward. Priya filed a motion to overturn the declaration of death, citing fraud and lack of evidence. The case drew national attention, with news outlets picking up Maya's article and running features on Elias's story. Protests formed outside Jeremiah's church, some supporting Elias, others defending the pastor. The town was a powder keg, and Elias felt the weight of every eye on him. The court date arrived, a gray morning in Savannah's courthouse. Elias sat beside Theo, his hand gripping Theo's under the table. Hannah was there, her presence a quiet strength. Ruth took the stand, her voice steady as she admitted her complicity in Jeremiah's actions. The congregation gasped, but Jeremiah's face remained stone. When Elias testified, he spoke not just of the legal lie, but of the love that had carried him through, Theo's love, his own resilience, the community he'd found. The judge ruled in Elias's favor, overturning the declaration and ordering an investigation into Jeremiah's actions. It wasn't a full victory. Jeremiah faced no immediate consequences, but it was a start. Elias's name was restored, his existence affirmed. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Elias only saw Theo, his smile brighter than the chaos around them. That night, they returned to San Francisco, their apartment a sanctuary after the storm. Hannah promised to visit, and Ruth sent a tentative text. "I'm trying." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Elias knew reconciliation would be slow, if it came at all, but he'd made peace with that. His family didn't define him anymore. Months later, Elias and Theo stood on a San Francisco beach at sunset, the same one from their early days. Theo proposed, his voice steady, his eyes shining. "You fought for your life, Elias. Let me fight for our future." Elias said yes, tears mixing with laughter. They carved "Love Defies Death" into a piece of driftwood, a quiet nod to their journey. Elias's story spread, inspiring others to reclaim their truths. He wasn't just alive, he was thriving, loved, and unbroken. His family had tried to bury him, but he'd walked into his own funeral and emerged stronger. With Theo by his side, he knew the fight had been worth it, not just for him, but for every heart still searching for a place to belong.